Guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm super excited to do this week's video because it means getting the Alfa Romeo back on the road. All the parts are either here or they're on their way. I've got the head back, we're ready to lap in the valve, so let's get stuck into it and get the car back on the road. This is how it normally looks when you get your cylinder head back. So what they've done is they've pressure tested it to make sure there's no cracks. And they've also machined the bottom of it. Now they've took 0.010 of an inch off of this, so it had a little warp in it. And apparently to reface these, they had to take the valves out. Which isn't a bad thing, because I was going to take them out anyway to give them a clean and replace the valve stem seals. So they've took them out already. The ones they've marked with an X are the ones that they said need lapping back in, but I'm going to do them all. So I'll use the finer grade on the ones without an X. The ones with the X have got slight pitting on them. So let me pop one out, see if we can see it. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it or not. There we go, I wonder if this will focus. I don't know how clear that is to see, guys, but you can just see some imperfections on the seat of the valve. So that's what we're looking at taking out. So we'll use some of the coarse grinding paste. Right guys, normally when you're doing this, you would do this by hand. So you would stick your suction cup on the back of your valve, take your valve out the head, put some of your grinding paste on it, back into the head, with a little bit of engine oil just so it slides in and out, and then you would sit and rub these in and out like so until you've got rid of all the pitting. Now obviously the coarse paste you would start with if it's really bad, then go down to the fine paste, but this probably takes, depending how bad they are, it can take up to half an hour a valve, so you could be here for quite a while. Now, my little hack that I've done for years when I was in the garage is grab yourself a cordless drill with a drill bit and a bit of vacuum hose on it. Pop some grinding paste onto your valve. Pop it back in the head. Like so. Stick your vacuum line over the valve, like so, and then use your cordless drill with some finger pressure on the back of the valve, like so. And it gets the job done so much quicker. So I'm not so bad. This is only 16 valves. Some engines have got a lot more than that. There you go. Perfectly clean, ready to seat. You won't have any leaks. You'll maximise the compression in that cylinder. So I need to crack on and get these other 15 done. I'm going to pop this on time lapse, get these done, and then we'll look at cleaning up the rest of the head, putting the studs back in and getting it back on the car. Right guys, next up might even be a worse job than grinding the valves in. What we've got to do now is put on the valve return springs and the collets that hold them in. So if you've seen on the shot earlier of the valve, it's got 3 grooves in the top. These are for the collets to sit in. Now these are tiny, and if you've got big sausage fingers like me, this can turn out to be quite a tricky job. So what we tend to do here is we start by putting the valve spring over the top of the valve. Now for any eagle-eye viewers, I haven't shown replacing the valve stem seals, but they have been done. The machine shop done them because they've got the tool for putting them back in. So put your valve spring on, you then put your valve cap on, and this is where you get your special tool. So, whoops, This side here, the fixed end, sits on the head of your valve. This side here is open to allow you to access the valve to put the collets on. So position it so you've got the fixed end over the valve and the open end on top of the valve spring. Then we clamp one side down, and next clamp the other side down, making sure that the head of the valve comes through the top of the till. Now, there's a couple of different ways of putting these in. I like to use a little magnetic screwdriver with a collet on the end of it, and then you very carefully drop the collet in so that it sits in the 3 grooves. Now this is very, very fiddly. You need to have quite a bit of patience for this. And you really want a good light as well. There we go, we've got one in. Now for the second one. There we go, they're both sitting in the grooves. So what we need to do now is really gently unclamp the till so that the spring can return and the seat catches the collets and keeps them compressed inside there, just like that. And then what I like to do, just to make sure they're seated properly, is get a bit of a rag over the top of the valve and just get a couple of gentle taps with a hammer to make sure it's all in. Now, if your collets aren't sitting right, they'll spring out, and it happens on the garage floor and know when you've rebuilt the whole engine. So that's how you do one. I'm going to crack on and get the other 13 done in exactly the same way. Right, finally they're done. That is worse than grinding the valves in. Now that you've got all your valves done, that is probably the worst job. That's definitely worse than grinding them in. But they're all in now. What we need to do now is get the studs back in. But before we do that, we'll clean up the surface so we get a nice mating surface for the new gasket. We'll do that on all the surfaces, so water pump, inlet manifold, exhaust manifold and thermostat housing. We'll get them all cleaned up. We'll get the top cleaned up, ready for the rockers, and we'll give the surface of the head another wee clean up, and then we're ready to put it back on the car and torque it down. So what we'll use for cleaning, best thing I've found is a bit of Scotch pad or a bit of wet and dry sandpaper. You don't want anything too harsh. These are 1500 grit and 800 grit. You don't want anything that's going to leave deep scratches or gouges in it, because you want a perfect sealing surface. So nice and easy, don't eat into it, take your time. Okay guys, so it's the next day. It's another beautiful day in Scotland, so I'm going to make the most of it and get this put back together. So last night I finished up by putting the inlet manifold on. I was going to put the turbo manifold on. I know I took it off with the head, but I think it will be easier to put back on the car. So what we need to do next is go and clean the block up, ready to take the new gasket, and I'll show you how to do that now. So what we need to do is get this as clean as possible. So what I like to use is some WD-40, spray it all over it, and then use a flat sanding block with a piece of 120 grit sandpaper, and just nice and slowly, take your time, clean it all up, get it as clean as possible, and then we'll be ready to put the new head gasket on. Right guys, that's the cylinder head all cleaned up now. Next we're going to install the new head gasket, and the head gasket will generally come with installation instructions. We've also got some new head bolts. These are a must as well. The most important thing to do in this though is once you get the head on and you've installed your head bolts, you need to follow the specific tightening torques and you need to follow the correct pattern, because you need to make sure that head tightens down evenly, and you don't warp it, twist it, anything like that. So first step, 65 Newton meters, then it's 3 sets of 90 degrees. I like to do the first 65 Newton meters, then the first 90, then I like to leave it to rest for a bit. So while it's resting, we'll install the exhaust manifold, and then we'll go back and do the last two 90s. But yeah, what I've also done, you maybe seen it in the time lapse, I got one of the old head bolts, cleaned it out, blew out the bolt holes, and ran the old head bolt in and out a couple of times, just to make sure everything's clear, there's nothing in the holes, and this is going to tighten up nice and evenly. So let's crack on, let's get this on. It'll have top and bottom marked on it, make sure you put it on the right way. Let's get this on, lift the head on and get these torque settings done. Biscuits, but I got a little bit carried away. I got the head back on and I've managed to get the EGR valve back on, full inlet manifolds back on, EGR pipes back on. This is all fairly straightforward. This is just doing it in the opposite of the way you take it off. So if you take your inlet manifold off last, that goes on first. Exhaust manifolds back on. Time to get the hydraulic lifters back in. We'll get the rocker arms on and we'll get the rocker box with the cams back on. rocker covers back on, cams are back in, vacuum pumps back on, oil filler spouts back on, EGR coolers back on. Found the V-band clamp, which is awesome. I've put the first coolant pipe hose on, and now before I do anything else I'm going to tackle the timing belt, just for a wee change, something different. So you've seen us do this before. Jack up your engine, take the engine mount off, new tensioner, new pulley, new belt, all the marks are still lining up, so we'll get that back on. Again, always turn it over by hand before you start cranking it, and then make sure all your timing marks line up again. Double check the tension on the belt and make sure it's all good before you put your covers back on and before you even try starting the engine. So before I put the injectors in, we'll do that because it's nice and easy to turn with no compression. So I'll quickly do that, and then we'll cut back in and take it from there. This is it, guys, we're on the home stretch. This morning I'm going to put the injectors in, we'll get the fuel filter back in, we'll get the intake pipes back on, and then we'll go for its first start before we build up the front end. Once, and we have got a thermostat that got delivered late yesterday, which is great. For a part we waited for so long, we finally got it, so we can get this wrapped up, get it back on the road. I can't wait. Right guys, we've got everything put back together. Front end is just sitting on. I've connected up all the water pipes, all the boost hoses are connected. I've filled it up with coolant. It's time to get a first start now and make sure everything's okay. So I'll pass this to Charlie, he can film it. Ready? Mm-hmm. Guys, it sounds a bit throaty because the airbox is there. The dashboard's lit up like a Christmas tree, but that's because it's jacked up and the steering angle sensors are all good. It sounds really good actually, so we'll leave it ticking over for now while we bolt up this front end. We'll get it done off the jacks and then we'll be able to take it for a drive. So guys, first drive out's gone really well. There's not a single problem with it. Temperature's staying nice, I'm not getting any warnings on the dash. I haven't really gave it any boost yet, I'm taking it nice and easy. I'll probably take it nice and easy for a few hundred miles, but it's so good to have the Alfa back on the road. It's so much nicer to drive compared to the van or anything else, and I'm just really chuffed to have it back on the road. So we're going to go and get it cleaned today. I'm not going to put you through the pain of watching that, because you've seen us clean cars up 10 times. So thanks again for watching, guys. We'll see you next week with probably the final video on the Ford Focus.